Hello everyone, TheMrTrails here, and today we are going to talk about a topic I've been thinking of doing a video on for a while, but just didn't get around to it. And that topic is the Evasion perk of Dauntless versus the Evade skills of Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter has the perks Evade Extender and Evade Window. Evasion in Dauntless is pretty much identical to Evade Window, and with these basically identical perks in two very similar games, you would think their usage would be pretty similar. However, that's not the case. One is seen as being a somewhat decent addition to your build, while the other is probably the worst perk in its game. And today we're going to explore why that is, because there are reasons. Just like there are reasons, I'm asking you to hit that subscribe button. Number 1, it's free. Number 2, it helps me out a lot. And number 3, even if you regret that decision, you can always unsubscribe later. It's a win-win-win. But what isn't a win-win-win is running Evasion in Dauntless. The main reason for this comes down to the dodge system already in place in Dauntless. Dauntless will already give you more iframes than Monster Hunter, giving you 7 frames at 30 FPS versus Monster Hunter's 4 frames at 30 FPS. And in Dauntless, you will only need one of these frames to line up with the monster's attack frames to gain invincibility. Dodging one frame of the behemoth's attack properly triggers conditional extension. This will typically render you invincible for the rest of that attack, unless there is a refreshing hitbox on that attack. Whereas in Monster Hunter's dodging system, you will have to dodge all of the attack frames from that monster's attack. And depending on how many attack frames there are for an attack, this can equate to a frame perfect to dodge. But Evade Window can help to make your dodges not have to be frame perfect. It'll basically add 1 iframe per level of Evade Window at 30 FPS. So running Evade Window can quite literally make it 5 times easier to dodge a monster's attack. But running Evade Window 5 would be seen as a bit much, because say you go with Evade Window 2, you have 6 iframes instead of 4, which is a 50% increase. That increase making a lot of attacks 2 or 3 times easier to dodge, and the skill summary you save by doing that can max out a different perk. Unfortunately, the Evasion perk in Dauntless doesn't scale quite that nicely, at least when it comes to 30 FPS. At 60 FPS, it does give you basically 1 extra frame per level of Evasion. But at 30 FPS, this means we only have 10 iframes, which means we go up 3 iframes for a +6 perk, when that +6 perk could have been used to massively contribute to DPS. Sacrificing something like 30% damage for 3 extra invincibility frames at 30 FPS isn't really worth it at all, especially when those 3 frames only equates to 40% easier dodges rather than 200 or 300% easier dodges. But that also basically covers the other reason why Evasion isn't really worth it in Dauntless, but can be slotted in Monster Hunter. In Monster Hunter, there are tiers to the perks, where you can only get a certain number of the tier 3 or tier 2 perks on your build. A lot of the good perks are in tier 2s or tier 3s, or in Sunbreak, some are even tier 4. And after filling in all of the DPS perks, which are usually in tier 2, you usually have a number of tier 1 perks remaining. And a lot of the tier 1 perks are basically up to preference on what you want to play. This is maybe where it would make sense to slot in Evade Window or Evade Extender, but these are actually tier 2 perks. So the main way you would include these on your builds is from the armor pieces, because the armor pieces can not only be giving you a DPS increasing perk, but can also give you something like Evade Window and Evade Extender. As long as you have a good perk for the main reason you're using the armor piece and good decoration slots on the armor, this can make Evade Window and Evade Extender be some pretty good secondary perks to have on those armor pieces. But the armor pieces in Dauntless are very different. Instead of having multiple perks at lower strengths, you usually only have 1 perk at half strength, accompanied by the cell slot, which will allow you to get another perk at half strength on that armor piece. And if Dauntless had a similar perk tier situation, then maybe Evasion could be reasonably slotted in sometimes, but we have perk categories, not perk tiers. Evasion being an alacrity perk, and even when you have alacrity perks on your build, you are not going to be running Evasion because there are much better alternatives in that cell category. Adrenaline and Endurance being alacrity perks, Adrenaline giving you up to 33% damage normally, and then when paired with Endurance can give you up to 66% damage. And many of the other perks in this category are move speed related, which you can actually use to increase your damage output from the Tempest Omni cell. So even when you have the slot for it on your build, there's always a better option. So there are a couple reasons for the Evade Window versus Evasion argument, but what about Evade Extender? Evade Extender can be argued to be a very valuable perk when it comes to a Monster Hunter build. Evade Extender basically just increasing the amount of distance you cover with a dodge. And the reason that might be pretty good is a bit of a fundamental difference in the dodging philosophies between Dauntless and Monster Hunter. Again, thanks to the conditional extension mechanic of Dauntless, you basically only have to dodge 1 frame of a monster's attack, making it much more valuable to dodge through the monster's attack. And seeing as you have a comfortable 7 frames to dodge 1 frame of the attack, this is much easier. However, as previously mentioned, Monster Hunter dodges can often become frame perfect, maybe having 4 frames to dodge a 4-frame attack animation. Because of that, it's often more valuable to dodge out of the way of the monster's attack rather than dodging into it. And adding a ton of extra distance to your dodges makes this style of dodging much easier. And both Evade Window and Evade Extender do also affect special dodges that happen in Monster Hunter. One of these dodges I've used a fair bit is the charged sidestep on bow. With Evade Extender, it covers about double the distance and makes for a much more mobile playstyle. It also seems to be helpful for light bowgun and heavy bowgun, because when all of these ranged weapons are drawn, your movement speed is pretty low considering you are trying to aim that weapon. And being able to dodge a larger distance from where you are currently is a pretty useful tool to have in your kit. On the melee weapons, you might not be using these things on your build, seeing as you will be more inclined to parry attacks rather than dodge out of the way of them, because it's both easier and you'll be dealing a large chunk of damage to the monster. But of course, you will sometimes still have to dodge on a melee weapon, so Evade Extender can still be a reasonable choice. With all this being said, Evade Extender does definitely have a place for it carved out in Monster Hunter, whereas Evade Window may be a little bit less so, but you still will have it on certain builds. And perhaps against certain monsters, Evade Window will be a little bit more desirable, especially if they are a bit of a faster attacking monster. But for Dauntless, there pretty much isn't a single build that you will see Evasion on. But perhaps the biggest reason Evasion just really doesn't see any use whatsoever is the lack of dodging you really have to do in Dauntless. Dauntless is a much faster game when compared to Monster Hunter. Very often, even if you're performing kinda poorly against a monster, it'll be dead within a minute or so. Except if we're maybe talking heroic escalation, where a good kill time on those would be about a minute. And when the fights are this short, 90% or so of that is going to be the behemoth being on the ground or reacting to part breaks and stuff like that. And if you were to put Evasion on your build, you would often still even have fights like this, even when you are wasting that perk summary. You can very casually have fights in Dauntless where you don't have to dodge anything, where in Monster Hunter, even if you are a top level speedrunner, sometimes you still will have to dodge. But there you have quite a few reasons why Evasion versus Evade Window and Evade Extender from Dauntless and Monster Hunter are much different in how they are played, with the Monster Hunter evade perks being sometimes desirable and the Dauntless evade perk being never desirable. I'm not including Etheric Evasion and Evasive Fury in those statements, by the way, but even those perks do have non-dodging counterparts that basically achieve the same thing, which are typically used over those perks. But can you guys think of another example of this within the genre? Of skills that basically achieve the same things between two games, but they are heavily used in one game but never used in another. Like, I know basically nothing about Dark Souls and Bloodborne stuff, so are there cases where this happens there? Let me know down below, and thank you guys for watching this video. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, and once again, hit that subscribe button for me. It's free, it helps me out, and you can unsubscribe later if you regret it. But I have been Trevor, I go by TheMrTrails, and I will catch you guys next time.